Greetings, my name is David Fulmer and I'm an author. I'm also a former journalist and for the past 15 years I've been teaching a writing program called Fiction Shop. Going through and coming out of these difficult times, a lot of us are going to have stories we want to tell and maybe stories we want to write. So on this YouTube channel, we're going to present all the components of Fiction Shop. And those components are plot structure, setting, character development, dialogue, scene structure, and sort of a catch-all that we call etc. But before we jump in, I want to make a few introductory comments about narrative nonfiction and fiction, the similarities and the differences, about what I call writer's mind, editor's mind, and about the concept of deconstruction. So let's get started on those. So, fiction and narrative nonfiction. Well, the differences are obvious. With fiction, you're working with made-up stories, made-up characters, a storyline that you've created. With narrative nonfiction, the facts are there. It's a true story, whether that be a memoir, a biography, something political, historical, any of that. As long as it's not something technical that really doesn't have a storyline. So, narrative nonfiction is what it says. It's a narrative. It moves through space and or time. So, those are the differences. For writing purposes, there are similarities. We still want to have settings and characters that are evocative, that are engaging, that people want to read about. With fiction, of course, you're creating them. With narrative nonfiction, they have been created for you, and the requirements to make them interesting are still the same, and we will, as you will see, will bring the same set of skills to doing that. So whichever one that you're interested in writing, these writing skills are going to be much the same. And as we go through, we'll discuss the differences, and also if you have questions, as always, you can go to the website, click on the email link and ask that question. So, fiction, narrative, nonfiction. Same set of rules, different content, different resources, but same set of rules. And now I want to discuss with you the concept of writer's mind, editor's mind. And what this means is that in order to write effectively, to write what other people are going to want to read, when we're talking about a narrative, we need to develop inside our heads, our one head, a writer's mind and an editor's mind. And what that means is we sit down to write something, and then we come back to it, whether right away or sometime later, in order to improve it, to clean it up, to edit it, and we come back to it with an editor's mind. So we have a writer's mind and an editor's mind in the same head. And that editor's mind brings an objective perspective. So you treat it as if it was written by a stranger. So, and what that means is that you don't tear it to pieces and trying to get it perfect, because there is no perfect. It also means that you don't give yourself all kinds of breaks because it's you and you're in love with your prose. You bring to it the objectivity of an editor. Now, how do we get that skill? By practicing writing and by reading. Okay, and that second part, the reading part, we're going to talk about in this next segment about deconstruction, about how you come to understand how really effective writing works. So, in the meantime, think about writer's mind, editor's mind. Another of the really critical skills to creating effective writing is deconstruction. Now, I had been doing this for a really long time, ever since I got interested in being a writer, but I didn't really realize that's what I was doing. And then I read Bob Dylan's autobiography from about, 15 years ago. And he talked about when he first came to New York and was learning to write songs. And what he would do is take these old blues songs, these old hillbilly records, the 78s, and he would play them again and again. And as he played them, he began deconstructing them. He began breaking them down into their component parts and seeing how they laid out and then how they came together again. And that's how he learned to write songs, and I realized that's how I kind of learned how to write, or at least one part of it, is that I was deconstructing things that I liked reading to understand how that author had achieved that. So to give it another kind of example, if you wanted to build a toaster, one way you could learn to build a toaster is by taking your toaster, tearing it apart, laying out all the component pieces, and then understanding how they went together, and then putting it back together. Now, when we're doing creative work, when we put things back together, we're not copying. We're just taking those parts and putting them back together our way. Okay, we're borrowing, and it's fine to borrow. Shakespeare stole with both hands. But another analogy is if you were a musician or wanted to be a musician, you would listen to other musicians and take a piece here and there. You like this lick, you like that, and put it together in your own way. We do the same thing with deconstructing writing. You find something that you really like and you spend some time understanding how that author pulled that off, and then use it in your own way. All right, that's deconstruction. Now, for further questions and comments, visit the website, www.davidfulmer.com, and you'll see the email link and ask away. So, in our next segment coming up, we're going to talk about setting.